Hello and welcome to Alex's Model Kits. This is an update on how I'm doing with the kits I'm working on at the moment. Last time I did a video I was working on two kits. I was working on an F.XVII 1/48 scale Seafire, and I was also working on a Langton's miniature 1/1200 scale white metal Napoleonic sailing ship. And they were both part of a group build that was being run by a chap called Ian Poulton, who has a YouTube channel called UK Scale Modeller. And that group build was due to finish at the end of March. We're now approaching the end of April, and I have just about finished one of those kits. So yet again, I've missed the deadline for the group build itself, but I'm quite pleased with the kit I've done. I haven't finished the Langton's miniature. I'll come back to that in a while, but we'll talk about the Spitfire. In fact, let's have a look at how I've done with the Spitfire now. F.XVII provide a cockpit access door with this kit, but you need to cut away the door from the main part of the fuselage to open the access up. Once this was done, the cockpit was constructed and placed into the fuselage, and some detailing was added. The plan was to build this kit with the wings folded for storage. So the main fuselage was built with the wing roots and undercarriage, and then the wings were built separately. My preferred method of building is to try and paint as much as I can before joining the parts together. This went a step further with this kit, as decals were added at quite an early stage. F.XVII provide all the parts needed for displaying the kit with the wings folded up, but one thing they possibly overlooked was that some of the decals span two separate parts. Here, the underside of the wings have a roundel that also needs to be applied to the wingtip that will be folded at an angle to the wing. So the decal had to be cut and applied in two parts. The same was true for the decal on the upper wing. They had to be carefully measured and then cut, so that part of the decal could be applied to the wing and the remaining part could then be applied to the wing root. With the decals applied, the kit starts to take on a bit of life. I ran into a problem with the underwing rockets that I planned to use for this kit, and the first attempt at painting them led to some very disappointing results. I'd planned to paint on the marking stripes for the rockets rather than use the decals provided by F.XVII, but this did not go as well as I'd hoped. So the rockets were stripped back to styrene, and a second attempt at painting was done, this time using the decals, and the results were far better. Now all that remained to do was to attach the rockets to the wings and attach the wings to the fuselage. The red pieces you can see are the supporting struts used to lock the wings whilst they are folded up. So there we are, that's the Spitfire completed, and I've got to say I'm actually quite pleased with the end result. I think of all the kits I've done so far, and I've probably done about, I guess, 20 or so. I think of all the kits I've done so far, that's the one I'm most happiest with. It actually, I do quite like how it looks, which is something for me. Most of the time when I finish the kits I'm working on, I look at them and think, I could have been a bit better. But with this one, it could certainly be better, but I quite like it. It's quite nice. It doesn't look too bad. So I'm quite pleased with that. And I'm pleased that I spent the extra time working on the problem areas that caused me to miss the deadline. I was really getting close to getting finished with the deadline. I think if I'd really pushed hard, I definitely could have finished on time. But the problem I had was with the rockets, as you saw in the video. I'd used a certain method with the rockets, which was to try and paint the bands on rather than use the decals provided by F.XVII. And I did that for a reason, which was I'd already encountered a problem with having the bands on ordnance in the past with an old kit, which I never did a YouTube video about. I did a kit called the F.XVII Bomber Command Resupply Kit, and that provides you with quite a wide variety of bombs, and they provide you with the decals for the bands to go around the nose cones of the bombs, and I hadn't really had much success with them. I tried to put them on, they looked awful. I ended up taking them off and just leaving the bombs without any bands at all, which annoyed me a bit. And when I looked at the internet and looked at what other people were doing, what they generally tended to do was to do an undercoat of the ordnance in the colour that the band would be, and then they'd mask off the area where the band should be and then paint the ordnance over the top with the correct colour. So when the masking tape comes off, they've got a lovely pristine band of colour around the nose cone of their ordnance. And so, having failed with the decal on a previous kit, I thought what I'd do this time round was I'd do what everyone else does, and I would paint on that undercoat and then overcoat it with the correct colour, but with masking tape for where the bands should be. And as we saw from the video, that didn't work at all well. I think the reason it didn't work was because the whole rocket assembly with the two rockets and the warhead and the mounting area where it attaches to the wing, that is all one single moulding from the kit itself. And so you're working in quite close proximity with the two warheads and the two rocket tubes. And whilst it doesn't feel fragile, you very definitely get a sense that if you apply a bit too much pressure, you'll be rewarded with two pieces of the kit rather than the one piece of kit you started with. So I think that kind of made me a little bit it just put me off, I think, getting the masking tape in the correct place. I think where I tried to thread the masking tape between the two warheads, it was a bit fiddly, and working too much on that and working too hard on that, I was always a bit nervous about maybe snapping something. And the end result was that I had something which wasn't terribly good. Now, I think even with that, looking as bad as it was, if I'd been making the aircraft with the wings down and just extended as normal aircraft, I might have been tempted just to kind of say, well, okay, that will do. I can still get this done in time for the deadline. Let's just get the wings under there, because they're not going to be seen. Once the kit's completed and on a shelf, you might just see a couple of nose cones of the warheads pointing out, but you're not going to see much to do with them. And I probably could have gotten away with it. But knowing that the wings were going to be folded up, it became very obvious that the ordnance is going to be quite prominent, and to have them looking as bad as that and yet so prominent on the kit, it just would have been a mistake. And so the decision was, I suppose, really made for me. There's no choice in the matter, really. It was a case of we're going to have to miss the deadline and just redo it again. And I'm pleased I did. I learned something of interest, which was how to strip enamel paint off of styrene by using, make sure the microphone doesn't pull here, I'm attached to the camera with a small lead. I used Mr. Muscle oven cleaner. Other oven cleaners do exist, but it seems that everyone recommends this. I'm not sure if other people have tried other oven cleaners and found that Mr. Muscle is the best, or whether someone's just said, I use Mr. Muscle, and everyone uses Mr. Muscle and no one else tries anything else. But either way, I went with the crowd. Everyone seems to be saying Mr. Muscle does the job, and it really does do the job. What I did was I put the parts into a plastic bag with a grip top on the top, spray a bit of Mr. Muscle in there, leave for 12 to 24 hours, come back and then carefully empty the contents so that you're not emptying your styrene down the sink, and then wash it down, and you have really got sort of styrene back to pristine styrene with no old enamel on there at all. It was very, very good at stripping away the paint and not damaging the enamel. So I learned something there, which is nice. And the finished item with the aircraft, I'm very pleased with. So it looks good. The rockets look good. The aircraft looks good. I'm very pleased. And so that's that now completed. Looking at the Langton's miniature, I haven't really got much further with that. I've got the hull is painted and the masts are painted up, and quite a lot of the sails have been painted. They're all set to go. I'm looking to do a little bit of detailing with a watercolour, which was recommended by Langton's in their painting guide, and this is that watercolour, which is a Winsor & Newton Van Dyke Brown. It comes in a tube, which I've never seen before. I've kind of left that to one side. I really wanted to get the Spitfire done as soon as possible. And I will now come back to the Langtons and do that over a period of time. Now there's no real deadline for that to get done. I'm looking forward to getting it completed. So that's the old group build finished. UK Scale Modeler has already got the next group build going, and that is to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the moon landings, which comes on later this year. And so his new group build is all about space. It's about anything that's been to space. It can also include fictional stuff, so Star Trek and Star Wars and Lost in Space and that kind of stuff. It's pretty much open for all of that, really. So I am now getting ready with the fated words, getting ready for the next group build. The group build has already started, and it ends, which I'm not sure when it ends, which is probably explains why I never actually get things done on time. But this is now the next kit to be done. This is a 1/44 scale Apollo Saturn V, which I will do probably as Apollo 11. Seems appropriate somehow, and that will be next to be started. I'll probably make a start on it later today, and we will see how long it takes me to make a series of concentric tubes, which is pretty much all this kit really is. So yes, no doubt I'll miss that deadline as well, but I will do my best. Honestly, Ian, I'll do my best to try and get this done on time. So that's it. That's pretty much where we are at the moment. Anything else to talk about? I've been experimenting with paint. I ran an experiment with some paint. For about 18 months now, I've been running a bit of an experiment with some paint, which was to try and pre-thin my enamel paint. I kind of felt that by basically doing what I do, and probably what most people do, which is to put a bit of enamel into a milk bottle top, and then add a bit of thinner, and mix the two together to get your thinned paint, and then paint it onto your kit. What I always felt was that you've got a lot of wasted paint left there. You put a small amount in, you put a small amount of thinner in, you do your bit of painting, and then you're left with residue paint that just, you can't use it. And you're also left with quite a lot of bottle tops, which, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these, because I'll probably just chuck them away. And I thought, well, maybe there's a better way of doing it. Maybe if I put all the paint from a tin into a glass jar and then add some thinner, so 50-50, so I'd decant an entire tin of paint into a glass jar, and then I'd fill the pot with thinner and swish it around and then empty that in there and then store it. Well, then what I have is a pot of pre-thinned paint, and I can just open it up whenever I want it, do a bit of painting, and then seal the top, and we're set to go for the next kit. Seemed like a good idea. There's no wasted paint. There's no messing around trying to thin things as you need them. It's just there, ready for you to go. And I've had some mixed results with that. So, actually, let's just have a look. So, this is pre-thin. Oh, I had a lot on my lap there. This is pre-thinned paint. It's not supposed to be a comedy video. Pre-thin paint, and some of this works really well. Some of this has remained nice and thin for actually now a couple of years. So I started with dark green and dark earth, and that's been used for, here we go, so 29 dark earth. Now that was the first one I did, along with 30, which I think only recently has gone off. So interestingly, 29 dark earth and 30 dark green, which have been used for all of my RF bombers I've done so far. They have lasted for probably a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, and that's still fine. It sloshes around, you can see how it separates out, and you've got the actual pigment at the bottom there, and then the thinned at the top, but a bit of mixing up, and that's just fine. As I say, 30 has just gone off. I realised, I think 2 weeks ago, that it's now gone crusty and dry, much like this. And what happens is that some paints go off really quickly. 82, I think it is, 85. So this is a satin black 85. Now I always have trouble with this. Now I've tried this 3 times in a jar, and every time it goes off, it becomes a solid lump easily within a week. It just does not last. But I've also found, in my experience, having always used 85 in the past, the minute you open this tin up, it starts to go off. Next time you open it up, it already has a crust around the top and you have to penetrate that and stir around. So this just seems to have a propensity to want to go off as soon as you expose it to any atmosphere. So it's no different. This is no different from being in the tin as it is being in the jar. They both go off. It's just that you end up losing things a bit faster. This was 78 cockpit green, RAF cockpit green, which I think is a Humbrol 78, and that's dried up. That lasted quite a while, but it's dried up as well. Some of them last really well. Some of them last no time at all. The metallic ones tend to go off faster, although this is actually Humbrol's 27001 50/50 mix. Lovely shiny pigment down there. So, end result, how do I feel about it? The plan had been to have a long-term store of lots and lots of paints, all pre-thinned. And I think that plan is not going to work. But I think for short-term, working on a large project, I think for short-term I would look at decanting paint into a jar and then keeping it all the time I'm doing a big project. So I've got some of the bigger aircraft I've got stored up the top. I've got the Valiant up there and the Victor, which I'm going to do in white. And even the Apollo, with a lot of white and quite a bit of black. I will probably decant white and black into jars for the duration of the project. Probably what will happen then is I'll decant too much and thin it too much, and I'll still end up with waste. But it's kind of there on hand and I can use it. So that's just a quick update, a small experiment I did. Make of it what you will, take from that what you want. For some people they'll say it's a waste of time, other people might say it's not a bad idea. Some might even have a better suggestion on how to improve on things. I've tried different jars thinking that these jars might not be as airtight as these. It makes no difference. Interested in your thoughts? Anything you have to say about it, let me know. I am wondering about maybe moving across to acrylic rather than enamel. It's a bit of a shame in some ways. I've used enamel for such a long time. I like enamel paint. I think it has a real richness about it. And plus I have so many of them around. It just seems a bit of a shame to kind of walk away from them all. But I don't know, I'm pondering. Paints are interesting things, and I'm pondering what to do there. So I think that is it. I think in terms of updates and what we're doing, that is it. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll soon see some results for the Saturn V, and I will see you again. Okay, thanks then, and goodbye. Bye.